Hello, welcome to the Aegis Interactive Asia and Business Mobility Asia COVID-19 update, 21st of December 2020. This week, a slightly different approach because yesterday I flew from Singapore back home to Jakarta, and I wanted to give you an update on how that happened. So first of all, traveling into Indonesia right now is maybe not the smartest thing, but when that's where your family is, that is what you do. So the situation is that I've been separated from my family for 293 days until such time as Indonesia relaxed the immigration rules as well as the quarantine rules. So I've taken the first real opportunity I had since March to travel back to Indonesia and spend some time here for a few months with my family and work from my home base here in the south part of Jakarta. So where is Indonesia right now? It's closing in on 700,000 reported cases in total since March, and probably today or tomorrow it will cross over 20,000 recorded deaths. By and large, the view is that there's many more deaths and many more cases, but given the parlous state of the health system here, it's quite likely that we'll never really know the true count on either, and all hopes are pinned on a vaccine. Now, the Indonesians have got an agreement with Russia and also with China, and I believe with maybe some other vaccine producers. The president has said that he intends to vaccinate all citizens aged between 18 and 59, and that's about 170 million doses that they anticipate to give within the next 12 months. So I'm not sure what everybody else does, but that's the current position. The city of Jakarta, DKI as it's known, has suspended Christmas. In effect, the governor came out yesterday and said that the holiday season was officially cancelled, and he was encouraging government employees not to leave the city. However, as with most things in Indonesia, the advice came too late because most people left on Friday, not on Monday. So it'll be interesting to see what impact, if any, that has. So let's talk about what it actually took to get here. First of all, I needed Indonesia to change the rules. So thank you to the government for doing that. I needed to have with me a copy of my health insurance showing that I'm covered for COVID-19 treatment, which I am. I had to have a current relevant travel insurance policy, which doesn't cover me for COVID-19, but will cover me for pretty much everything else. I needed to show my PCR negative test that I had done 72 hours before. Had to have my Asia Pacific business travelers card, which I did, which allows me to stay for up to 60 days, and a return ticket. So I had all of those things, which were all thoroughly checked by the Singapore Airlines check-in staff at Changi before I was allowed to go through immigration and await for my flight. There were no further checks in Changi, just got through the check-in stage, went to immigration. It was all contactless, so scan your passport, scan your boarding pass, and away you go. And there was nothing else happened, even in just checking my boarding pass, getting onto the flight. On arrival in Jakarta, there was the usual amount of chaos that is just part of everyday life here. First of all, we were told by the Singapore Airlines aircrew that we would be disembarked in groups, and that we were to remain seated until such time as those groups were called. So sitting there quite happily waiting for a group to be called, I noticed that people from the back of the plane were going past me. So I grabbed my bags and bolted out the door to find that half the plane had deplaned in front of me. So step number one, when you see people moving in Asia, move. Our flight arrived at Terminal 3 in Changi, all international flights, sorry, in Changi, in Soekarno-Hatta Airport in Cengkareng. There was another flight from Saudi Arabia, which had a lot of returning domestic workers, and I'm not sure who the other male passengers were, no doubt workers doing jobs in Saudi. And there were a lot of them, maybe 2 or 3 times more than were on our A350 flight. So the first step was we were all asked to follow a very enthusiastic gentleman who kept calling Singapore Airlines, and then we were told to sit on properly spaced out chairs. And he himself handed out a couple of forms to every person. So just one guy handing out a form to about maybe 100, 120 people who are on that flight. So yes, that took some time. No explanation what the form was. We just had to wait for him to then come back to us individually and tell us what we had to write down, which was basically your name and your address and that you had a negative PCR. We're also asked to make sure that we had the eHack app on our phones to show that we actually had a negative PCR test and our passport numbers and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that was all done. Eventually, we were then ushered to another area, which was full of people from the Saudi flight and no real instructions what to do. A lot of people started to walk past that, but were stopped by some military personnel who very gently but forcefully told people to go back and find a chair. So eventually we sat down, and then another person, or a couple of people came around and checked our forms and checked our app. People who didn't have negative PCRs, didn't have any test at all, or didn't have the form, didn't know how to fill in the form, they were sent off to the side. And then we had to queue up for what you can see in the background behind me are queues of people waiting for a basic health check, check your temperature, your pulse rate, look at you and make sure that you're not falling over. So this was quite chaotic a little while. People didn't really know what was going on. You can see not much social distancing going on there behind me. And suddenly our first friend, who was calling out Singapore Airlines, went over to the left-hand side there and said, all Singapore Airlines come over here. So everybody, including people off the Saudi flight, rushed over. He quickly sent those who were clearly not from the Singapore flight back to the other queues. And we were processed pretty quickly. Like I think my temperature and pulse test took about 5 seconds. And then they put a stamp on the form. And then in the very background of the photo behind me, you'll see some yellow signs. So down there, there's a range of doctors who were sitting behind big glass panels. We handed over our test. We handed over the form that the previous people had stamped and signed, and got asked, do you feel well? Have you been anywhere but Singapore in the last 14 days? And where are you staying? And then sign and stamp, and then said, thank you, you can go. And so wandered off into immigration, found the APEC queue, probably spent the most time with those guys. They were, I think I must have been the first APEC card to come in, on their shift at least. There were a lot of phone calls and checking. I dug into my briefcase and pulled out the printout that I'd made from the immigration site and handed that to them in Indonesian and English, and they thanked me very much. They were able to go straight to the site and find it, and then there was a big discussion between them and with me about exactly when 60 days was, and they agreed, I did not, that I had miscalculated by 1 day, so I've got to change my return ticket and come back a day early. They were very, very polite but firm to say that it's not possible to get an extension on your APEC card. You have to leave by that date. So that was fun. We did all that, and then I went over and grabbed my bags, and again, as I was trying to leave the baggage area to go into customs, 3 very large Indonesian military gentlemen in full kit were stopping everybody and politely but firmly insisting to see our PCR test again, as well as the form that had been signed and stamped by everybody else. And then we were waved through, and the guy in customs could care less, to be honest. In fact, he didn't want to take my piece of paper off me. And I walked out into a wet, hot, humid and rainy Indonesia to join my family. So nobody asked to see my insurance policy. No one asked to see my travel policy. No one asked to see my return ticket. All they looked at was my PCR test result and my APEC card and my passport. That was it. So while these things are necessary, just don't expect everybody to actually look at them. So now I'm back here in Indonesia, and I'll be working from here for the next couple of months, continuing to update the situation as it occurs here. With the Christmas break now, there'll be probably less testing because there'll be less staff available to take the tests and process them. So we may see the numbers drop, but in reality, Indonesia's not going to improve until the vaccines commence in large numbers. I don't know how quickly the government intends to bring those. I believe they're looking to manufacture a lot of that here through Calfarm, and Indonesians are very supportive of vaccines as a rule, and so I'm hoping that we'll see Indonesia return to some stable position, maybe within 12 months, but that's the reality of it, that we shouldn't expect to see anything significant happen. In terms of business, the new PSSB here in Jakarta in particular is that pretty much businesses are shut again. Cafes, restaurants, everything are allowed to be open between 7 and 9, I think, or 7 and 7. The malls are down, but everything's back to 50% capacity. We just went out to Starbucks for quick coffee early this morning. There was only us and one other customer. Lots of takeaway. The Grab Food, Gojek food guys were in and out pretty often doing takeaways for people. But the staff had taken half the chairs out and put big red X's in other places. So that makes it appear as though everybody's got the message on that. But also this is Christmas to New Year break, traditionally here in Indonesia. From about the middle of December to the middle of January, there's very little business done, so we don't expect to see much. We have a couple of projects that we're actually working on at the moment. One we hope to kick off immediately after the new year. How much we can get done on site is another matter, but for the meantime, access to government information and online data continues to be available. Travelling to other parts of Indonesia is quite troublesome at the moment. Domestic flights, you need a PCR test taken within 7 days. So people flying to Bali have to go and get testing. There is testing available at the airport. There's quite some discussion in the expat forums as to how effective that is and exactly where it is. People seem confused by it. We don't intend to go anywhere, so it probably won't trouble us much. So that's it for 21st of December. Not likely to do anything now before Christmas. So a very Merry Christmas to all who celebrate, and a wonderful holiday season to everybody. And thank you for tuning into these regular updates. This one's a bit longer than normal, but we had a lot to cover, and we'll see what we do next week. Thanks. Bye.